So welcome everyone to this session on, I'm calling it Being Connected with Life. It's about dependent origination or codependent arising. Patika upada, it's a hard one. Patikasa upada, which is the Pali, most often translated, as I said, as dependent origination or dependent co-arising, which sounds really heavy. Just the translation alone, I kind of like the being connected with life. It's kind of what it points to. It kind of describes a natural law that the interconnection of all things, the contingency of all things, that nothing is separate or independently existent. It's all where everything's being influenced by everything else. It's often, well, it is presented as 12 links in a cycle. And sometimes it's referred to as the cycle of samsara. Have people heard of that statement, cycle of samsara? Some may have seen mandalas with the wheel of life. Tibetans often have wall hangings, tankas that have in their homes or in temples depicting the wheel of life. I can show you one of those. Let's see if I can. Maybe not. It was here. Yeah. But if you haven't, you can just close that. You'll see these elaborate either drawings or cloth depictions in each, and they're using pictures to illustrate each of the 10 links in the wheel. Then the idea is this wheel's constantly spinning, and we're kind of being spun around in this cycle of suffering, and that's what the links kind of point to, that process. And we can jump around the wheel. It's not like you just go from one to the end. You can kind of move around this wheel, but it really does show us in a very concrete way how suffering arises, how dukkha, stress, unsatisfactoriness arises, and therefore it also shows us the way out of this suffering. So it presents the problem as well as the solution. Because as soon as you can stop that linkage process, you're free of the wheel. It's no longer sort of spinning, so to speak. A couple of quotes. Nisargadatta, he's a non-dual teacher, an Indian taught in Bombay for many decades. It's quoted as saying, "Everything is interlinked, and therefore everything has numberless causes. The entire universe contributes to the least thing. A thing is as it is because the world is as it is." So the least thing. So a grain of sand wouldn't be a grain of sand without the entire universe contributing causes and conditions for that grain of sand to be as it is. Meister Eckhart, who I've quoted before here, is the Christian mystic, Dominican monk from 1260 to 1320s, who was excommunicated from the church for his teachings, and now is quite a well-known teacher. His teachings are are more well known now than they were when he was excommunicated from the church, um, said, "All creation is a single unity. It is all in all." And one I really love. It takes a while, perhaps, to absorb this other one. Separate yourself from two-ness. Be one in one, one with one from the one. There is no other. I find just offering these other spiritual traditions really kind of points to the universal truths of some of these teachings. That it wasn't the Buddha saying. Of course, the Buddha said these things in different words, but they're pointing to the same truth. The Buddha said, "This dependent origination is profound and appears profound. It is through not understanding, not penetrating this teaching, that this generation has become like a tangled ball of string, covered as with a blight, tangled like coarse grass, unable to pass beyond states of woe, the ill destiny, ruin, and the round of birth and death." So he really emphasizes the importance of this teaching. In fact, when the Buddha talked about his awakening, he talked about it in terms of the Four Noble Truths, or the teachings around dependent origination. So we can see the interconnection internally during our meditations. That's what I was trying to point to during the guided meditation. In a 35-minute meditation, sometimes it's hard to see at that subtle level, but that's something you can explore in your practice, in your meditations, seeing how the mind, body, heart is all interconnected, how one affects the other. I mean, you can really you see this when you do yoga practice or any kind of awareness-based movement practice, and can see the mind start to settle, perhaps. So you can really see this interconnection between the mind and body. So and it's the seeing that is not just hearing me say everything's interconnected and yeah, that sounds right, and okay, now what? Now what are you gonna, you've really got to sort of feel it in your bones and see it for yourself, and see it at these very subtle levels. And I think this is why the Buddha said it's such a profound teaching, a profound and subtle teaching. So we're seeing life, experience, the world arise due to nature just unfolding. It's natural processes unfolding. But what we do as human beings is we personalize it. It's happening to me. It's the objects out there happening to an object here. There's a separation between a duality created, a separation that's created. And of course, life is phenomenon, and experiences are just rolling on. Everything's interconnected and rolling on, arising, causing each other. But when we see it as personal, under our control, or perhaps governable in some way, we struggle. We struggle with each moment as it arises. So there's a real freedom, and I think that's why we use this word freedom, liberation, in allowing life to unfold as it's appearing moment by moment. Right? This, this allowing. It's not clinging. It's the second and third noble truths really being displayed here, that there's a cause of suffering, and he looks at the cause of suffering in these 12 links, and there's a way out of this suffering, and that is to be conscious enough to break out of that spinning wheel, kind of stand outside, back from it. So the practice is to see this for ourselves. So in the meditation, I was talking about seeing the interconnection of the body, and seeing how when we cling to anything, when we struggle with or interfere with anything that's arising, there's a stress that arises. You can really seeing that. And then seeing too, when you allow and allow the things to unfold, that the stress ceases. There's non-stress. There's no dukkha. So it's a really seeing it for ourselves. So it's not adopting a belief that this is true. And a lot of what I see around this teaching, it's a lot of academics discuss this. It probably has to be the most studied and discussed academically of all the teachings. So there's a lot of like really heady stuff out there and debates about little nuanced points, and a lot of belief systems that get embedded in it. But it's not about believing it or studying it in all that detail. I mean, studying it can be helpful, but really the 90% of your engagement with it, I would say, would be your experiencing it and seeing it's true in your direct experience, rather than developing it as a belief. So it's a self-discovery, self-exploration, rather than a conceptual understanding. So we see it internally. We can also see it externally. We see interconnection and co-arising when we are naturally loving and caring. When we let go of the separateness, and we see this interconnection, we see love. So I kind of see wearing now wearing a mask with the COVID-19 is mandatory in law, but before that was the case, I really saw wearing a mask as an act of love. It's in seeing that interconnection, because there's the possibility of passing a virus to another being. That's seeing that interconnection at a interpersonal or external level. So we're really always looking internally and externally with our teachings. Nisargadatta has another one of my favorite quotes. One of mine is Ajahn Chah's, let go a little, have a little peace, let go a lot, have a lot of peace, let go completely, have complete peace. I love that quote because it shows us that there's a process of learning and engaging. It's not just, your total confusion to enlightenment. You can let go a little and still have a little peace. So I love that quote. And Nisargadatta has one where he says, see if I get seeing in internally I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. Exploring externally, I see that I am everything, and that is love. And it is in between the two that my life turns. So I really love that because it really shows us how this internal exploration and this external exploration around our interconnection is seeing wisdom. You're seeing that you're nothing. You're rising based on causes and conditions, unfolding. But then when you explore externally, you see that you're everything because you're part of everything. You're not separate. You're everything. So that's another one of my quotes, and I think it's very appropriate to this, to dependent origination, because it's in seeing nothing and everything that you see dependent origination, this co-arising. If we personalize everything, we feel separate. And we're more likely to be self-centered. And that creates suffering internally, and it also creates suffering in the world. So somebody put out, years ago, saw this mandala. So it's that wheel of life that I was talking about, that the Tibetans generally draw with pictorials, and he had, kind of how the social and economic suffering that's created, and it was all done in these drawings, much like a Tibetan monk would do with all these diagrams. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting pictorial display of how we create suffering in the world due to this feeling of separateness and self-centeredness. So as I said, it details the arising, the 12 links details the arising of suffering, how it arises. And it also therefore presents the path to liberation. It's also held within that map. So it's also a model of awakening. So the problem and the solution, so to speak, are both within that same model. And it's a dynamic model. It's not like a deterministic or linear model. It's very dynamic. I mean, if you say a grain of sand is there because of the universe, it's caused by all these factors, that's a very dynamic process. So if all these conditions are in place, an event occurs. But it also says if the conditions are changed or altered in any way, that something different can occur. Really important. So like take snow. For snow to happen, we need, certain ground temperature, certain atmospheric temperature, certain humidity levels, certain accumulation of cloud moisture. I mean, I don't know all the scientific details, but you get the picture. You need all these particular causes and conditions for snow to fall. Now, if you change one of them, it's a different event. It might be rain. It might not be, might be ice pellets. Might be nothing. So you need this is the kind of how it's presented. So we can there is a path to the end of dukkha, to the end of suffering. The conditions can be worked with. And there's also something I'll just mention, but there's also a relationship between karma. Have people heard of karma? I mean, a lot of times we think of it meaning, you build up karma, and then you're reborn as a diva being, like a god, or an earthworm. If you're, so you be really good, and then you'll get a better rebirth. And I mean that, and there's, that's somehow sometimes how this is taught, perhaps in some traditional Buddhist cultures, where it's more of a merit, building up merit for a better rebirth. Whereas I'm presenting it as a letting go of self and letting go of personalizing this interdependent arising, moment by moment. So there's birth and death in each moment. It's not like, it doesn't need to be lifetimes. So this idea of karma is each of our every action has a consequence. So it's individual. You build karma. So if you do carry out an action and it has a negative consequence, you can learn from that and go, okay, there's the consequence of that. And if I do that again, you kind of change your intention. I won't do that again. And so it's very much tied to intention. So it's conditionality. In our thoughts and our deeds and our speech, we plant the seeds for future arisings, for conditions. So the karma is kind of individual. So what arises in a moment is not only due to causes and conditions that are completely out of our control, right? I mean, there's so many, most of what unfolds moment to moment, you've absolutely no control over. But there is that aspect of karma, right? So what you did in the past moments planted seeds for what arises in that moment. And what you do in that exact moment affects what happens next. So you can see how it's not a hopeless. Just because you're accepting what's arising moment by moment, you're accepting the natural unfolding of life. You still have this effect on future causes and conditions. It's non-deterministic, so nothing is automatically inevitable. But of course, you have to be conscious to know what seeds you're planting, right? If you're just going through life unconscious and reacting and seeing yourself separate, then of course you're not going to be able to have any control. You're just thrown about, even though you think you have control. But if you're conscious of your actions, deeds, and speech, then you can correct. You can redirect energies. You can correct ignorance, so to speak, and change the sequence, change those links. So that's a freeing, kind of radical. When the Buddha was saying this back in his day, a very radical thing to say, that there is this way to break out of this cycle. So if with wisdom, when we're conscious of our actions, we can directly affect what happens next. And we can affect future moments. So the interconnectedness of all things, unfolding of natural processes, and accepting that unfolding. Thich Nhat Hanh points to this with his phrase interbeing. He's talking about all beings, not just human beings, but all sentient beings in the universe. So even a grain of sand is totally dependent on everything else for its existence. So it's just seeing, I guess, can you see that acting as a separate being that can control life and control your experience, can you see that how this can cause suffering? Can you see it in your own life? See how it causes suffering. This sense of separate. So you think of to give you an idea of how this causal chain is how complex it is. So you can never figure out sort of why a thought arose or why a body sensation arose. You can't figure out why you're here tonight. Can you think of a cause that brought you here tonight? You might think of one. Think of other causes. There's a few other causes that brought you here tonight. Now, each of those causes, think of what caused them to arise. And then those causes, what caused those causes to arise, to come about. So, but all you can say is the universe brought you here, right? Because you can this just grows exponentially. The causes that would have brought you here tonight. So you didn't decide to be here tonight. You may think you did. The universe got you here tonight. It's also kind of liberating in a sense too. I remember when I was teaching, I was teaching social work on TV back in the 90s, big first year class, and it was, television cameras in the classroom, broadcast on, actually, nationwide, people watched it all over the country. And I would get very stressed. A lot of stress would arise. And I started to think, at first I just thought, well, yeah, public speaking is stressful. In fact, surveys show it's the number one thing people are afraid of. Death is number two. Public speaking is number one. I don't know if that's true, but there are surveys where they've found this. But this kind of stress would arise. I started to explore it as, what is this contraction, this tightness, this dis-ease that's arising? So I start to look at what's the thoughts that are arising around it. What's the thoughts of, well, I don't want to, I want to look like I know what I'm talking about. I don't want to, I want to just this. It was all me focused. It was this separate self that was worried about what other people would think about it. And when I saw that, I could kind of go, well, okay, I'm doing this because I want to pass on information and knowledge to other people. I'm not doing this because I have this separate self that needs building up. Because if I'm doing it for that, then of course I'm going to be stressed, because then there's a possibility of failure, and make a mistake, then what are people? So it's just this proliferation of possibilities that causes stress. But if I'm doing this to be of service, I guess is one way of putting it, from a caring and loving place, because we all are interconnected, then the stress just dissipates. You make a mistake, just go, oh, that was kind of, you can just kind of roll with it and then move on to what's actually happening, and that is the being of service part. So you can see how that's a very real way that this can affect how we interact with the world. So you can think of anything in your life that's occurred, or occurring, and explore it in this way. Or is it, if there's stress, is there a separate self here, a sense of a separate self, isolated, in control of everything that's arising moment by moment? I still prepared. I prepare for these talks. I get my notes, and I feel comfortable that I have something to offer, and then let it go. That's it. From there, it unfolds. Yeah. So you can think into your life, things that where stress arises, and look to see if there is a sense of this interconnection of or is there more of a sense of interference, trying to control, sense of a self in control that needs protecting. Another famous quote from the suttas. I think these sentences occur hundreds of times in the suttas. And I'll end with that and open it up for some questions. So this really reflects the quote is often called "this that conditionality," just to make it sound really enticing. When this is, that is. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. When this isn't, that isn't. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. Now that sort of encapsulates the conditionality, causes and condition teaching, because it's got a kind of a few patterns. It's got the present moment, when this is, that is. So the first and the third really connect things in the present moment. When this is, that is. When this isn't, that isn't. So that's like very present focused. And then the 2 and 4, from the arising of this comes the arising of that, is future focused, over time focused. And from the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. So there's this interplay between very much present focused to the coming, a cessation or an arising. So this interaction, it becomes it's complex in that sense. So nothing is a standalone event. Everything exists interdependently, and everything is codependent on everything else. And if we see this, we can pierce through this illusion of separation, this illusion of this duality of of a separate self that's manipulating objects in the world and trying to control the world. Because if you think you can control the world, or you can control what happens even to you, if you think you can control what happens to you, then if you suffer, it is your fault. I think I've said this before to you folks. It's one of the few quotes I have that actually I think they came from through me. I don't think I read it anywhere, but so this came to me when somebody was really talking about why am I suffering? I do this and I do that and I do this. It was like in a group interview, and I do this and I really try hard to control this, and I make sure that I never do this, and I still suffer. I said, well, you're never going to control all that. So if you think you can, you're always going to fail and you're always going to suffer. But if you just let it be and just, kind of, I don't know, is this serenity prayer relevant here? If you try to, let go of the things you can't control and just kind of control the things you can control. How's it go? It's that got that kind of flavor, at least, of letting go of this sense of control. Because if you think you have control, and you can't, right? Because everything's interdependent, and this complex of conditionality, you can't control. So all you're doing is struggling with what's ungovernable, with what's already arising. You're just struggling with what's already arising. Which then really blocks you up in terms of what you can do next. Because now you're beating yourself up for failing on what you couldn't do. So that doesn't open that door for the wisdom to in these wise options to kind of emerge into the space of awareness, the space of stillness. That between stimulus and response is that space. That's where you can see the conditions that can be dealt with in that moment. You can also change conditions by doing loving kindness meditation. Another way where you alter conditions. Coming and listening to this talk has changed conditions, right? It's a simple thing, It's going to change some conditions, some way. It's inevitable because everything's interconnected. So, seeing the inseparability of everything. So even I think even I probably shouldn't say this in a insight meditation group, but even a philosophical understanding of this is slightly freeing, I think. I started off by saying you have to see it during your direct experience, and that is really where the freedom and comes, the deep seeing and freedom comes from. But I'm certain I talk to people and give them kind of a philosophical brief idea of it, and there's a sense of it can ease some suffering, just letting go a little. Oh yeah, I didn't cause that. That just arose. Steve said, cause and conditions caused that. It wasn't me. It's kind of like now I can just kind of easily, see what I can do from here. Like my dad says, he's no Dharma student, but he says, I'm going to go with the flow on that. I'm just going to kind of see, just going to go with the flow. It's a 92-year-old wisdom. So I'll open it up there for any questions and comments. Oh, you're muted there. Oh,
I guess I should unmute
yeah,
myself.
there we go. I was trying there. I couldn't get the button.
Yeah. There was something, I wanted to thank you for the talk, and there was something very profound that hit me. And although I knew it on an intellectual level, but I actually understood it. The moment you said it, well, of course. So when you say when something is happening, it's already there. And basically it's already the past, because the moment it's there, it's already the past. So you can change it. No matter how much you would try, you can get upset about it and why did this happen to me and on and on and on. But it has already happened. So that was just kind of an eye opener for me. And I think that's going to be something for me to carry with me and really apply this much, much more often. So I thank you for that.
And even the thought, why did this happen and why did it happen to me, already happened.
Exactly. So, yeah. Trying to change the past.
Yeah.
I have a question, which is really kind of embarrassing because it's so nitpicky, but it did arise for me. And you said something, it's the use of the word already. And you were saying about, a number of times you said already arising. And is there any difference in meaning between arising and already arising? Because I thought maybe I don't get something here. You were saying struggling against which is what I do, struggling against what is arising versus struggling against something that is already arising. Is there no difference? Is this just words? Or is there a difference in meaning? Thank you.
Well, that's pointing again to that same notion of once something is noticed in awareness, once awareness is conscious of something, it's already happened, right? So it's already arisen. It's history. So when we struggle with our experience, we're really struggling with history because it's already arisen. So it's a word I use a lot because I'm trying to point to that notion of that what we're conscious of has already happened. It's over. You're conscious of it, it's happened, it's over. It's the next moment. What happens in that moment, you're conscious of it, it's over. Then there's another moment. What happens in that moment, you're conscious of it, it's over. Then there's another moment. So then when you hold on to any one of those moments and try to control it, if you just let it go, you go on to the next moment. It's gone by itself because it's the past. So that's what I'm pointing to with the phrase already arisen. We're struggling with what's already arisen or what's arising. You can kind of look at them as the same, but one's pointing to that historic aspect that we're conscious of something. Did you see that? Did you see what I'm saying here? Because it's really crucial. You're struggling with the moment. So a thought arises. Oh, I don't like that thought. I got to get rid of it. Well, if you just saw, well, there's a thought. It's gone. It's already gone. It only sticks around if you grab onto it. The body sensation can be a little different because a pain in the knee can intensify and linger. I mean, you can explore it and stuff, but at some point, if it's super painful, you can move and stretch it or whatever. So there can be an action. So some, but the moment that you feel that sensation is just one moment, then there's a next moment, then there's a next moment, then there's a next moment. The moments just keep rolling. Phenomenon, life just keeps rolling on. We're just completely receptive to it rolling on. We're not trying to freeze frame a moment, try to figure out why it happened and why it happened to me and how it just creates a big narrative in the mind, a lot of storytelling, proliferation of suffering. It doesn't mean we don't learn from things that happen. We could go, you back your car into a tree or something. You can kind of go, oh, what happened there? I guess I should turn around when I back up. I mean, you still do that. Maybe the thought arises, well, that was really stupid. I'm a terrible driver. Well, now you're overlaying a story. Yeah. I hope that's clear. Thanks for the questions.
Stephen, you had talked about cycle of samsara and breaking the link, and I'm just trying to fit together some little snippets of information that I sort of think I have about traditional views on this, and then what you're talking about. So what I'd kind of understood about samsara is that it's kind of linked with the notion of reincarnation, and that you sort of go through cycles of death and rebirth until you finally are able to get insight, become enlightened, and you break free from that cycle. And maybe I've got that wrong. And tonight you're talking about separation, or the sense of separation. So what I was kind of getting at of breaking the cycle in the way you're talking about it is, we sort of have a sense of self, and then there's suffering that arises because of that, because we see ourselves as a separate entity that we're trying to defend, and we're trying to hold on to it. And if we see ourselves as if we go beyond that, and we see ourselves as really part of the process of life, being everything, then there's no beginning, ending. It's just being part of this process, and that threat of ending and the suffering that comes with that ends. So there's a bunch of ideas, but I wonder if you could talk about a bit the traditional kind of views and how you're portraying it, and whether I've got any of this the least bit correct.
Here's a book. Your question requires a book. So that's a book about dependent origination. So, Buddha Dasa, Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa, the Thai teacher, because that's a very involved answer to that question. And he talks a bit in the introduction about how in Thai Buddhism, the dependent origination is seen by the culture and society as being merit-based or moralistic teaching, where you act in this life in certain ways so that you have a better rebirth. And he's saying when he taught this, he taught it from a non-self stance and looking at moment to moment experience. And he talks about from his teaching why that is important. And he actually kind of in the book, and I was surprised as a monk teaching this, kind of disputed the notion of there being anything that can be reborn. Because what would it be? If you take dependent origination, so it's really a moment to moment cycle that he's looking at. So each moment has a birth and a death. Now, but some of you maybe have some other experience with the notions around rebirth, and that's fine. I mean, This is just a teacher that resonated with me in terms of this deep teaching that resonated more with me. I mean, I have no experience of past lives or rebirths, and as the Zen monk said, I have no idea. You'd have to ask a dead monk. Now I kind of take that approach. I just don't know. So all I can relate to is what's arising moment to moment, and the Eightfold Path does include the moralistic trainings, and I also look at those as aiding in our moment to moment cultivation of mindfulness, because there's a notion of letting go of self-blame for things that we did, and being able to meditate if we lead a life that built on harmlessness, non-harming. So I look at those teachings in that way as well, as opposed to, I better be good or I'll be reborn as an earthworm or something. Yeah. Oh, but that book, I think, if you really want to dive into this topic, I would recommend that book. And if you want to sort of dip your big toe into it, you could read an article by Christina Feldman, 2011. I think if you just searched for Christina Feldman dependent origination, it's spinning the wheel in the title as well. So that's a briefer document on it. And we will talk about the 12 links. I didn't get into I didn't even mention what they were. So I thought somebody might ask about that. What are these 12 links you speak of? So we'll start exploring those and how they interplay.
Something you said tonight really, I mean, overall it was great, and thank you. But something you said tonight kind of felt very freeing, and is something that I'd like to work on focusing on more, and that is this idea of trying to grasp and control everything and hang on to everything. And it's always, there's always balls dropping, and getting your arms around everything in life and trying to control the and things slip away, and then there's this feeling of frustration or loss, or it gave me a moment of stepping back to think, that's crazy, and boy, would it ever be nice not to do that, and just to sort of continue in the doing what seems right, but not being not with the expectation that everything has to be under control, and what happens, and let it go. Mm-hmm. And I do too much of that, dwelling on what's already happened, and then, grinding along with the thoughts around it. And wow, that felt, I got a moment of, wow, would that ever be great just not to do that anymore. So I think I'm going to practice that a little bit and see if I can. So thank you.
Even letting go of the sense of control a little brings a little peace. It's all the letting goes. So years ago, I had kind of a mantra, or a gata, as Thich Nhat Hanh would call them, just a saying that I would say over. And I started to see that busy mind was really related to a craving for control, a sense of control. If I just sit here and my mind thinks enough, I'll be able to figure out all the contingencies, right? I didn't think quite enough, and that's why things went off the rails. So if I just think a little more, and I got to the point, I went through a phase where couldn't sleep. I would lay down to sleep, and the mind would go, oh, no, it's no time for sleeping. I gotta think of all the contingencies. This is not good. There will be chaos if you close your eyes and sleep. And so I had this gata where I would say, I don't know if I can remember it exactly. It's some of the lines is letting go of control. The mind cannot control everything. And I would just say that over, letting go of control. The mind cannot control everything. Letting go. Of course, it distracts the mind because there's this repetitive phrase. It's kind of like watching the breath. I mean, something else and it settles the nervous system a little bit too, having a gata like that, it's like, or almost a prayer that you just say over and over, and so that helped me let go a little of that sense of control. I found it very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. I saw on the faces of people here too that that resonated loudly. Oh, if I just think a little bit more, it'll all work out. And it's a torment that I personally have, and I saw on the faces. I'm glad you all showed on your faces. Thank you. It's such a torment. Anyway, thank you.
What I was thinking when you were talking was this issue of we're time binders, and we're, and you mentioned suffering being one of those things that you experience when you're looking at the past and dwelling on all those things that you screwed up on, or that that you're clinging to. And then you were describing how you're thinking about something which is kind of like the future. If I could do this, my future will be, structured. It will be safe. It will be, sweet and sound. I've always, well, not always, I've struggled with trying to look at, like, thinking about the past, which pops up all the time, and suffering through it, and then suddenly thinking, but that person's gone, or that event already happened. Why am I still, like, suffering for something that no longer exists? And the same with the future. I mean, like, I have to talk to myself about that. And I'm wondering whether that's part of, like, a Buddhist philosophy or a psychology where I think it's Trapa talks about, the idea of meditation and is to free oneself from neuroses. And for me, neuroses is clinging to the past and fearing the future. So is that what this independent origination is sort of trying to speak to?
Yeah, I mean, clinging, which is one of the links, right? Which is very much part of that, the second noble truth as well. So it's built, there's a similar process of sense contact, experience, craving, and then clinging. So clinging is just wanting things to be different than they are. So not being okay with the natural unfolding of experience, of phenomenon, of objects, whatever it is. It's not being okay with what is in the moment. That's what clinging is. Maybe then there could be, a fear of the future that's arising. So then the mind kicks in and starts trying to problem solve it. I mean, we're a problem-solving culture. So then the scientific method is swept through our culture too, where everything can be figured out if you just research it enough. And So we've got that kind of embedded in our cultural upbringing. I mean, so much of our causes and conditions are societal and cultural as well. How we respond to things is so much that based is this cultural aspect. So that control, wanting to control the future, is deep. It's a deep pattern within us. It was personally a deep pattern. See it all the time arising.
You're not talking about a passivity, right? I mean, because I'm thinking in the COVID age, I mean, if we wanted to kind of get into causes and conditions and going with the flow with COVID, I mean, I see it as there is a need in some ways to try to reduce the suffering that's out there, right? So I don't think it's a passivity to life necessarily. I mean, it must be some kind of wise thought or that intervenes in this in some ways that allows the causes and conditions to be something that one could live with.
Yeah, as I sort of said in the middle of the talk, it's not a deterministic model of causality. It's got the formula for awakening or freedom from the cycle built right into the model by not clinging. So you can still, I mean, when we've talked about this in this group, we act in the world with love because we see that we're everything. So that's very much a part of our actions in the world. Well, it's from this non-self-centered perspective. We're not acting in the world. So when you see people acting in the world, sometimes you are they acting in the world because of a love, or are they acting in the world because they want to be seen as somebody who is good? It could be they're acting in the world could be as much from a place of insecurity as it could be from a place of love. So this is an acting in the world from a place of seeing the interconnection. So which is by its very nature, and it comes from a place of love, of caring, of service, however you want to phrase it. So yeah, we're very much engaged. We're engaged internally and we're engaged externally. So yeah, I'm constantly looking at, well, not constantly because that would make me frantic, but I am looking at what precautions I would need to take, especially with my father. He's more vulnerable, right? So there's that aspect. So there's this engagement with the world. Yeah. Well, hopefully I can talk more about that too as we get into the links, because it's the internal, external. We practice internal, we practice externally. Yeah. So I think I'll. Did you have a question?
And if there's time, but if
yeah, there's time, sure.
So yeah, just with all this that we're talking about tonight, it's very intriguing. I found myself while you were talking, you had mentioned 3 particular quotes, and immediately I felt this craving and need to capture the quotes, and I couldn't capture them in time. I scribbled down a couple of words, and so now there's this craving to try and search for those words and, use them in my meditation or whatever like that. So is that the type of control and craving you're kind of talking about, or is this something that could help my progress? Like, it seems to me that it's down to the intention behind the action as opposed to the action itself. Is that right? And just before that, another question regarding, you sent out an email with regards to the trauma, 3 trauma sessions. If you could mention something about that, that would be great. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, so there can be, I mean, a Dharma talk is intended to be a kind of a meditation as opposed to a, you know, an exchange of information, because you can read a book, or so, you know, we meditate, kind of get into a meditative stance to receive a talk, and some of it resonates, and some of it doesn't resonate at all. Some of it's confusing, some of it's clear. I mean, it's all over the map, right? And there can be this craving to understand it all, and so there's a kind of healthy letting go of that can be very helpful. And you can be sure that what you need in this moment, you will hear. Right? And you could listen to this same talk 3 years from now and hear something completely different. Now, I've done that. I've listened to old talks and gone, "Whoa, I didn't know he even said that." Like, because I read some notes from Matthew, my teacher, and so I didn't know he even said stuff like that, and I must have been sleeping when he gave that talk, but it didn't resonate at the time. So yeah, just let the words kind of wash over you, and I would let go of needing to take notes or get quotes. You know, if there's a particular quote that you think would that really resonated with you, and you'd like to kind of have it written down as a reminder of that teaching because it really sort of got you at gut level, then yeah, then I for sure I can just email me, and I'll, you know, if it's the Nisargadatta quote about internal, external, and, you know, I kind of paraphrased that one, so I'll have to actually, because I think I might embellish it a little bit, but he's basically saying, you know, you look and explore internally, you see that you're nothing, and that's wisdom. You look and see externally, you see that you're everything, that's love. In between the two, my life turns. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah, I'll have to get the words exact though, but I think I do. I think he says the real quote is like, wisdom is seeing that you're nothing. Love is seeing that you're everything. And in between, life turns. I think those are the exact words. Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful quote. Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't run for the hills when we heard dependent origination. That was going to be the title of the topic. So that was great. I'm glad you showed up for it. It is a truly profound teaching that, and there's very few talks out there. I'm always amazed at in the insight meditation world that it's not a topic that's, you know, delved into as much as, you know, like the Four Noble Truths, for example.
So just on I guess somehow it's related to, in my mind, to what Nikki said. Would it be fair enough if I think of it sort of struggle is non-acceptance?